Hello everyone, I'm Crow77, and today we're doing something a little bit different. I want to take a look at a game that I played, my thoughts on it, and mistakes that I might have made during it, also known as a Paifu review. I wanted to share a video like this both because of the requests that I've had, and as a way to improve my own gameplay. I tend not to review my games as often as I probably should, which is a habit I'm trying to change. Due to the nature of this type of video, I'm going to be doing this a bit more off the cuff than my normal videos, so I may be uncertain of what I'm talking about or different things like that. Whether you like or dislike this type of video, please let me know. The feedback's always appreciated. That said, I'm hardly the top dog in the English Mahjong world. If you like this kind of content and want to delve deep into the minds of top-level players, I would highly recommend Daniel Moreno's channel. You may better know him as Daisuke, but he's one of the very, very few foreigners recognized by the JPML as a pro player. I'll put a link to his channel in the description if you're interested. Let's quickly cover the basics of Paifu review. First of all, it's important to know that there's no real wrong way to do it, as long as you're making an honest effort to evaluate the game and not ignoring your mistakes. Whether it's your own game or another person's, always be honest about it. If you don't voice your opinion, we're not going to get anywhere with this kind of review. That leads me to my second point. Reviewing other people's games is often more helpful for them than reviewing your own is for you. Since there's so many different perspectives in Mahjong, being able to look at someone else's perspective and ideas can help break us out of a rut, by bringing new experiences to the thought process. Third, I highly recommend keeping hands closed and not marking winning tiles, even though replay clients let you do both. It is important to simulate what you can actually see in the game, to prevent thoughts such as, oh, of course that's what they had in their hand, when in reality, you might not have been able to tell at the table. Lastly, it's important to work towards an objective. What are you trying to improve? If you focus on key areas, especially when you're reviewing your own games, you're more likely to get something out of that review, whereas keeping it general might not allow you to go deep enough to find a pattern of behavior or improve anything. For myself, I'm currently trying to improve my push and fold judgment, especially against open or Dama 10 hands, as well as trying to avoid autopiloting by making decisions based on all the information I have instead of just a couple key heuristics. Alright, without any further ado, let's get started. This is a game I played on an alternate account of mine, so it's currently in the Jokyu room of Tenho. That's probably similar to about the gold room, most likely on Mahjong Soul for people who are from Mahjong Soul. We're the last dealer here, which is kind of a benefit and kind of a disadvantage. Statistically, you're more likely to go broke in the fourth position because you'd have less time to come around for your dealer turn. But you also have the advantage of Igariyame, which means that you can end the game if you're winning after winning a hand. So kind of a mixed bag, but overall it's definitely considered an advantage. So with this, we have a decent starting hand, nothing super exciting. So we're going to play pretty standard here, just starting to discard a couple of honor tiles and everything, and try to just build probably a quick Pinfu or something like that. We do have the 9 pin, which is near the Dora, so that's important to keep in mind if we end up drawing the Dora and want to try to use it. Over across the board, we do see players opening up, so it looks like they could be on a flush. That's something to watch out for, because so far we have not seen a bamboo discarded from them. But at the same time, our hand is progressing pretty well. We're just one tile away from Tenpai for just a Pinfu hand, which is a reasonable place to be. I did decide to discard the 9 here just because I do want that Pinfu. If I keep the 9, even if I draw a Dora, I'll have to reach. Whereas if I draw anything to connect to the 5 or the 8, we're better off because we can just take the Pinfu and not have to worry about reaching and putting ourselves at risk. A little bit unfortunate draw there. We did make it to Tenpai, but I don't want to reach on a bad weight with just the reach and nothing else. We did draw a Dora though, which gives us some outs to have a pretty decent hand. I did end up deciding to switch off of the 5 just because we have a couple tiles already around it, and I don't want to end up in Furry 10 either. Here I did end up drawing the pair though, and decided to just take the reach. Having at least 2 Dora with a reach is 5,200 points, and I think it's worth a bad weight here. So we'll just kind of skip quickly to the end of this hand. And we see that the dealer did end up winning in this position. They reached and then were dealt into very quickly for a pretty reasonable hand there. So not ideal for us, obviously. We would prefer to win the hand, but not too bad either. Alright, next hand is also a pretty strong one. We can see that we have 2 Dora here, very close to an Ipeko, that double run right there. Still a little ways to go. We might just end up with a Tanyao 2 Dora, It really depends on what our hand draws into and what the best route is to go. So we do end up connecting a couple tiles here. The 1-3 isn't really ideal. I'm probably going to try to get rid of that just for the Tanyao, for that all simples. 2's not a great draw, so I went ahead and discarded it here. Mainly because if I end up using that and making the 5s my pair, I'll have to discard a Dora, which isn't really where you want to be with this kind of hand. Hand is progressing pretty well overall, though. I am trying to keep this 4 to upgrade the shapes, so if I can get rid of this 1-3, I can get back to Tanyao. Nothing too exciting here. I end up dropping the 4 just for a little bit of safety at this point. It might be a little bit preemptive, but I did a video on Sakigiri recently, and I was starting to get a little bit concerned that keeping this 4 in my hand could make me have to fold when I wouldn't otherwise want to. So I went ahead and discarded it here and decided to hold onto the south wind, which is a much safer tile. Unfortunately, drawing a lot of the 2s here. Not exactly what I'm looking for. This does allow me to switch up though, so by drawing this 3, I can switch over to a Tanyao without really losing out on too much. We can see that 2 of the 2s have been discarded already, so there's actually more tiles live for the pair of 3s and 6s than for the 1-3 shape. So pretty good upgrade there, and I do find the Pon. So I take that for just a Tanyao 2 Dora Tenpai. Pretty good spot to be overall, and we actually get it right away too. So pretty clean little 3,900 point hand plus the Honba, so puts us into a nice position in second place here. Alright, kind of an ugly hand here, unfortunately. Nothing too great. So just going to pretty much discard normally and see where it takes me. This is the kind of hand that you could look to fold very early, depending on what happens, though. Not great draws either. I'm not really finding any value as part of the problem. Well, there's some value. That's helpful. Probably should have discarded this 1 a little while ago, honestly, because having the 1 and the 4 in the same suit means that this 1 is actually a lot worse than it would be otherwise. Okay, so pretty reasonable. I would like to be able to switch up to a Tanyao, but unfortunately this 1 is pretty locked in. So unless I end up drawing the 4 bamboo, it looks like I'm going to be stuck with having to reach. Okay, starting to be a little bit worried here about the player across from us, so something to keep an eye out for. We do end up drawing this 2 though, so we actually have a lot of outs to be Tenpai at this point. But unfortunately, player to our right does deal in here, so nothing really going to come from this hand. No harm, no foul though. It did look like a pretty cheap hand, so I wasn't too concerned about it as I was dealing tiles there. Okay, so pretty close race for first. Fourth is already very far behind though, so that's a pretty good spot to be. It's kind of a free roll. You know, if you get third in Tenho, you don't really lose any points at all. A little bit of rating, but that's about it. So it's a pretty good spot. If you could just never get fourth, obviously you'd be rocketing up the ratings. So with this hand here, we do have 1 Dora that's not connected in any way. So I'm actually kind of hesitant to call this east wind. Just because with no value, it's kind of questionable as to what the benefit is. We do see some other people calling pretty aggressively here, though, so we could potentially call to try to block them off their hand, because it looks like we're getting to the point where we could be pretty quick overall. So at this point, it's a little bit hard to say. I could see discarding the Dora, but that said, these hands don't make it look very safe at all. This could be an open Tanya over there. They could have another pair of 8s. Same with the player to our left. It looks like they're on a flush, so they could use this 8 very handily. So I think I'm going to try to keep it in my hand and build a shape around it if I can. So I think that was a slight mistake here. I think I'd rather hold on to the 5 and discard the 6 here, mainly because the 3-4-4-4 shape is most likely to give me a pair, or I can pair up the Dora. So I think it might have been a slight mistake there. I think I was looking more at maybe drawing a 7 or 9 to connect the Dora and then being able to discard the 3. It's very close either way. I think I'd rather go for the high upside of potentially having a pair of the Dora, though, in hindsight. Okay, and this does take me to Tenpai. I think it's reasonable to take this Tenpai here, and I do. We're kind of at that position where no one's hand looks super dangerous. Yeah, there's 2 people that are open, but you can see that they've discarded, 4 or 5 tiles, and then stopped improving their hand, so nothing super dangerous, but if someone were to call it, I'd definitely have to reconsider that. Just discarding the 1 for a little bit of added safety there. And that's another safe move here, so this weight's a bit worse, because I go from being able to win on the 1, 4, and 6 of characters to just the 6 of characters or the 4 of bamboo. And the reason I did that is because I am starting to be a little bit worried about the player to my left here. We can see that he's discarded a Dora, so after discarding the 4 from his hand, it's just very questionable. But we can see that both these players that are open have discarded the 2 of bamboo, so it should be pretty safe, and switching this up probably won't hurt me too much in the long run. With cheap hands like this, it's important to remember to be able to play defensively. Nothing too dangerous from my draws here. This 9 is actually the most dangerous thing we've had in a while, but with the 8 passing earlier, we can see 2 of the 8s. I just go ahead and discard it there. Obviously, seeing none of them on the board is a little bit questionable, and the dealer does end up pawning it. So we still have to be very considerate of what's going on. Luckily, with an honor that's been cut already, it's not too big of a deal. And I do get the opportunity here to switch up my hand and discard the 6, but you can see I've discarded both the 5 and the 8, so I'd be 3-10 there. So I'm going to go ahead and just discard the 7 instead. It's also a little bit safer since the 4 has passed a couple times from the dealer, so it would be Suji to that. This is another switch up just for safety. The 7 was kind of screaming at me, it's right at the next to the Dora, even with all the 9s dead. We can only see 2 of the Dora at this point, so there's 2 more in someone's hand somewhere. So I just didn't trust it and I switched off of it. And taking a look at it, it looks like that was a good move. So we can see across the board, these 4s were really blocking them, and then to our left, we're waiting on either 4 or 7. So we kind of dodged a bullet there. It looks like the hand wouldn't have been worth too much into the dealer, but even just losing 1,500 points isn't necessarily a good move. So I'm pretty happy with that switch up there, being able to read the table, and I'm pretty happy with my judgment of how I was switching around that hand. Alright, so with our next hand, we're sitting on 2 Dora already with a pair of the Chun. So I think I'm going to try to call this Chun if it comes out pretty quickly, but other than that, I'm just going to try to play efficiently and try to use these Dora that I have. And it looks like another player is trying to make a fast hand too here, unfortunately. A couple players. Yeah, so something to keep an eye out for. Luckily with open hands like that, they're not necessarily too expensive, especially with a call like this. Having 3 different calls with 2 different suits, it's not really much of a threat. The con does make it a bit more of a threat though. So kind of a weird place to be with everyone making all these calls over here. Gotta play a little bit safer at times if the opportunity calls for it. And it looks like I'd take that opportunity here, so I discard the 2 because I can see all 4 3s. So the 2 is a pretty safe discard. It does kind of lock in my pair, which isn't necessarily a problem, especially if I can get the call on the dragon. Ooh, that's interesting timing on that Riichi. So, looking at this, I do have 2 Dora now with potential for a 3rd if I get the 3 so. So in this position, I don't know, it just seems like it's too far from 10 by still. Yeah, I think I'd just fold here, given the opportunity to do it again. Not necessarily full fold with that north, but yeah, given next tiles and everything, I probably would have followed immediately with this 8, and I could kind of push off the judgment of whether I have to push or fold. But I think I would have probably erred towards the side of folding. I am curious here, now that the hand's over. Yeah, so looking at this hand, they had a lot of danger there, so that was actually a 3-sided weight. Potentially 3 Dora Tanya Riichi, if I'm reading that correctly. Oh, sorry, 2 Dora Tanya Riichi. So yeah, not exactly the sort of hand you want to fight against, so I'm pretty happy with what I'm looking at there with making the decision to potentially fold. Alright, so that pushes us into a pretty solid second. We're pretty close behind first here and have a reasonably fast opening hand. So So again, just playing pretty standard and pushing towards Tanyao. We do have to make some kind of decision with what to do with this shape. It's a little bit of a monster, honestly. So we'll just have to kind of see what we draw and decide where to go from there. Okay, so this is a position that I wanted to take a look at. So having the 2, 3, 4, 5 shape is pretty beneficial overall. But the 7 allows us to accept the 6 or the 9 to make it to 10 pi by discarding the 2, so I think overall this is a reasonable advancement to make. Yeah, okay, I think I'm happy with this. If anyone sees anything else and wants to leave me a note in the comments, please feel free to do so, because I'm not positive on this discard. It looks a little bit weird, especially when this kind of opens up opportunities to not be Tanyao anymore. And would have drawn the other pair too pretty much right away, so that actually would have been pretty good for me. But we do make it to 10 pi. We can be on the good wait, you know, waiting on 6, 9. And Riichi Paifu is a little bit weak, but as the dealer I think it's completely reasonable, especially when the game is this tight still, just because there are a lot of opportunities for you know, self-draw for all sorts of different things to get some value here. Obviously something like Orador would be perfect, and getting followed by 2 other Riichis is not exactly the best feeling in the world. Okay, so player was on 7 pairs. Wow. Yeah, chasing a Riichi with 7 pairs like that is not usually recommended, just because it's pretty hard to win with 7 pairs sometimes, but they do it and it works out for them, so no harm, no foul really. We're kind of in the same position we were in. Looking at this hand, a couple awkward shapes. The 1, 2, 4, 6 is not really ideal, because drawing a 3 or something like that just leaves you on a bad wait for the 5. Have 1 north wind, nothing really to write home about. This just looks like another quick hand that doesn't have too much potential. I think this was a slight mistake. Discarding the 1 is better here since you have the 4 adjacent to it. That's kind of what I'm talking about with autopilot. So I was probably looking at this hand and just deciding, you know, I'm going to discard this 9 on my first turn. That's the way I want to go. But drawing the 1, I should have reevaluated that. Oh, sorry. I'm missing something entirely in my evaluation. The 1's Dora, so holding onto the 1 is actually the correct way to go. Never mind. Okay. Yeah, so ideally drawing another 1 to make it a pair would be very good. But honestly, at this point, just looking at the hand across the table, I don't think I'm ever going to let go of this 1. Just because it is too likely they're on some kind of flush or something, some kind of massive hand. I just don't think I can ever discard this 1 in this game. And sometimes it is okay to make that decision that early. We do have the potential to just wait on a pair for the 1s as well. So it's not like we have to get it out of our hand or anything. Good news with the 7 coming out like that, it's just perfectly safe to do that here. It's always important to get rid of your flush tiles like that whenever you're concerned about someone being on a flush like this, when you get the opportunity to, and if the player to your left has discarded it, it's completely safe that round. Okay, so this does allow me to kind of start switching back towards Tanyao, and I do take the opportunity here. You know, if I draw the 3 or something like that, then I end up with a pair of 4s. I just have to be able to get rid of that 1. So I'm going to be looking for that opportunity, and with this Riichi coming out, it's probably not much of an opportunity, honestly. Okay, so here we have to make another decision. I suppose not quite. The Screen Dragon's pretty safe, yeah. So discarding that makes some sense here. Okay, now we have to make a decision. So this 1 is kind of stuck in our hands. I don't see any good ways to get it out of here. So I think I'm fine with just folding here, and I do actually take the fully safe route. There's an option to just discard the 2 here instead. It'd be Suji to them. I can see all the 4s. It's not super likely they're waiting on the 2. But at the same time, I think just going all out and folding is pretty reasonable here. Okay, so yeah, 2 coming out, completely safe here. 7 coming out there. Okay. And this is one play I was actually pretty happy with in game when I'm talking about autopiloting. Just because when I saw this 6, I thought for sure, okay, well I got the 6, I've got another safe tile, I'm good to go. But then 2 more tiles come out here, right? So we got the 4 and the 5. Looking at this, having the 5 come out this late like this is a little bit of a red flag. It's not super bad because it's Nakatsuchi. Both the 2 and the 8 have been discarded. So it's not super unsafe, but at this point it's just safer to discard the 5. It's always 100% safe to discard the tile that the person to the left of you just discarded. And I was pretty happy with that because they actually did switch up their hand to wait on the 6. So if I had discarded the 6, that would have autopiloted in, so I would have dealt right in. So pretty happy with that play. It looks like I'm managing to avoid the autopilot pretty well here. And just a reasonable size hand from that player, which does put us into first, but just by a little bit. Okay, another reasonable starting hand. We have potential for a 2-3-4 Sanshoku. A little bit awkward to get there. We'll have to find another pair, but that's something that we can, and we actually do find the other pair. So okay. I went ahead and discarded, committed to the Sanshoku right away. I think that's completely reasonable. Sanshoku 1 Dora is a pretty good place to be. So here I also do Sakigiri and just hold on to the south wind. I think that's fine. This 8 isn't really doing much for me. I suppose there's some potential to hold on to it to upgrade the 6-8 shape, but it's not the best ever, because this can even upgrade by itself. If I draw the 5, I can have a 3-sided weight, even if some of it does get rid of the Sanshoku. But I think that's alright. Anu would have drawn it right away too. Yeah, it's hard to say if the Sakigiri was worth it or not. It's pretty early to be Sakigiriing, so I think it actually probably was a little bit of a mistake to not hold on to that 8. No, well.
Riichi.
Okay, and then the Riichi does come out. So not really ideal, but we did keep this safer tile on purpose. And now we have to make that decision, though. Yeah, I think with how close this game is, I really don't want to deal into a Mangan or something here, so I think folding is probably the best way to go. So I think discarding the 4 here is fine. Oh, sorry, I completely missed that. Discarding the 1's much better. This allows me to switch up into a Tanyao hand, potentially anyway. And it gives me 2 safe tiles, and discarding your pair is usually the easiest way to rebuild your hand if you want to try to fight later. Okay, and that player, wow, actually deals into a Damaten hand. So that was a hand I didn't read, but that's a pretty big one too. Wow, is there any way I could have read that? I don't think so. So the problem is discarding a pair like this is very common when your opponent reaches and you don't have many safe tiles, because passing 1 means you can pass the other one. So by them discarding that, I assumed they were just on a very harsh fold, but turns out they were on just a monster hand instead. Wow, so that one's pretty hard to read. I'm not sure if I could have done anything with that. Okay, moving into South 3 here. So we're in 2nd place, again, pretty decent spot. 3rd's a little bit, right on our heels, but we'll see what we can do. Unfortunately, this hand isn't really great. Discard the West Wind in the hopes of getting an abortive draw, but unfortunately didn't get anything there. Here we do have to make the decision of what we want to do with the green dragons if one comes out. With this hand not really having much value, I think I'd be hard-pressed to call it in this position, so I'd probably pass on it for now. Yeah, okay, I do pass on that then. Yeah, I think that's reasonable, because there's definitely paths that end up with this being the pair in my hand and declaring Riichi instead, which has a little bit more potential upside as far as getting points goes. And okay, that makes sense. Yeah, so this might actually eat up the 7s and switch my pairs a little bit, so. Okay, so at this point I decide to call it. So call and discard the 1 pin, hoping to draw a 2 for the pair. I'm not sure I like this play. It really opens up the hand a lot. Completing the 1-2 shape isn't likely, and this gives us an opportunity to discard it. I'm on the fence about this one. It's probably fine now that I'm looking at it, just because this 6-7-8 shape can upgrade into quite a few different things. Even drawing a 5 or a 9 allows you to be on a Nobetan weight, so like 6, 7, 8, 9, waiting on a 6 or a 9 for your pair. Yeah, okay, I'm fine with this. And this does allow us to kind of stay in that position where we're still ahead of the player in third place. Oh, actually discarding the 7. Interesting. I don't like that as much. I think I should discard the 1-2 here. Okay, so some quick calls coming out from across the table. Again, I think this is another good spot for the 1-2. Holding onto the 4 is just fine, because if you draw the 5, you have that same no baton shape. Okay, and there's a no baton though. So here we can take the opportunity to discard the 1-2. Ooh. Okay, so discarding safely and discarding the 2. Okay. And Khan comes out, making the 7 Dora. Ooh. So that really does entice me to try to push, if I get the opportunity to. Okay, yeah, that seems fine. I think folding here is completely reasonable. 3 came out, it's completely safe, and it looks like 3 players are still pushing, so I don't think it makes sense for me to stay in this hand, so dropping out is perfectly fine. We do see the 6 come out and a Ron, so if we tried to break this up and keep a pair somewhere, it wouldn't have gone well for us. Yeah, it really wouldn't have gone well. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that push-fold judgment there. Alright, so now we're on the last deal. We need 3,900 point hand to be able to win, and it looks like this hand is just short of that, unfortunately. If we call the south winds anyway. So I think at this point I would pass on the souths if they came out. Pretty quick overall. Lots of potential here, so drawing the 7 is perfectly fine. I can discard the 6s and go for a Tanya or something. Even that's fine, honestly. Okay. That might be a little bit of a preemptive Sakigiri here. I think discarding the west is just fine here, because reach with the Dora is enough to overtake. So if this is just missing out if you draw the 7 of bamboo. Unfortunately, the player across from me is pushing pretty quickly here. But I do take the opportunity to call. So the benefits here... yeah, the benefit here is that I can, win the hand. If I win off the player to my left, it puts me in a good position, but I don't actually break 30,000 points if I win this. So that's kind of an awkward place to be. Is this too early? At the same time, I think I also pretty much have to call a south wind if it comes out, just because 1-8 is already out. Yeah, so I think either way, I'm pretty likely to end up calling. So I'm okay with that, I think. I'm really not sure about that one, though. Okay, and the south wind does come out, allowing me to roll. So now we're in a position where any hand wins us the game. Okay, yeah, I mean, I'm alright with how it worked out. It's just a question of if I should have pushed for having better luck a little bit more. Yeah, it's hard to say. I can't really say one way or the other. Alright, so looking at this hand here, pretty reasonable starting hand, a little bit heavier than I'd like. It's going to be hard to get rid of one of these pairs unless I draw like a 7 of bamboo or something like that. But we'll see how it goes. Oh, that's actually a pretty good draw here, so incidentally that looks like a slight mistake though. Yeah, it is. So I should have discarded the 3-pin here instead of the south wind. South wind, once again, a little bit safer tile across the board, and this 3 isn't actually going to do anything for us here. We're not going to switch up to a Tanya or anything like that by switching our pair over. And this is a pair of the Dora too, so discarding it is a little bit questionable at times. So keeping the safer tile over the 3 is just fine, because these are both 3 on men. So yeah, I don't like this south wind discard. Okay, so I think I noticed that here. So discard the 3 to keep the 8 a little bit closer to the edge of the tiles. So yeah, and discarding the 5 properly. Okay, so yeah, completely reasonable. Reach with a good weight to take the game. And unfortunately get followed right after, and that player self draws a hand. Unfortunately, pushing me to 3rd place here, so Not necessarily ideal, but that is how the game ended. I think overall I'm pretty happy with what I was trying to focus on, the autopiloting, especially when folding, trying to do safe folding as opposed to just finding a tile that seems safe against the Riichi. So I did pretty well there. A couple questionable plays that might need to go to some kind of analysis tool or something for, but overall I think I'm pretty happy with it. As always, thanks for watching. If you have any feedback, topic ideas, or issues, please let me know. I'm especially interested to hear what you thought of this new type of video. If you want notifications of when I post a new video, hit the subscribe button. Have a good one.